Cutoffs and Coffee. Welcome back. James and CT here, your hosts, as always, in our Cutoffs with our coffee. Episode 30 today. We have Cressey Sports and Performance pitching coordinator, Jordan Kraus. Jordan Kraus has been a buddy of ours for a while. Some of our listeners may recognize him from working with him at T3 Performance, but now he's been with Cressy for a while after an internship out there and has learned a ton and worked with a ton of high-level pitchers. So obviously we take a deep dive into pitching and what it takes to really throw gas, right? We talk about all the importance of the weight room, the things that you do inside the weight room, and also recovery and the mental side of the sport. Jordan drops a lot of knowledge, and he also tells us how important it is to get really, really good at the simple things, really good at the boring things to be able to help propel yourself to greater heights on the baseball diamond.
And this episode is brought to you by Foundations of a Five-Tool Baseball Player, an ebook that I wrote to help guide youth baseball players at the middle school and high school level to guide their performance training. We talk about how important it is in this episode to start your training early, especially if you're specializing in baseball. The weight room effect has a greater play in your sport the earlier you start. And we talk about that. And if you need some guidance, go ahead and look at the link below for a link to the 5-tool foundation of a baseball player. Also, if you need some Cutoffs and Coffee gear after a delay, we are back in stock. So hit up CT in his DMs, all right, at The Real CT to get your Cutoffs and Coffee gear. We got sick t-shirts. You got to cut your own sleeves off. We got some awesome hats. Right? Summer's right around the corner, so you're going to need to shade that noggin of yours. Keep that sun out of your eyes.
And if you like what we're doing on the Cutoffs and Coffee podcast, please subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Apple and Spotify, wherever it is you listen to your podcast. Get the ebook, get the gear, reach out to us. Also follow us on our individual social medias. That's where we like to tease out people who we're going to have on the podcast to give you, the listener, an opportunity to ask questions to some of your favorite high performers here. So without further ado, episode 30 of Cutoffs and Coffee with Jordan Kraus. We hope you enjoy it. Coach, welcome to the show, man. Cutoffs and Coffee. How you doing, bro? Great to see you.
I'm doing well, man. It's great to see you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. It's been a long time coming. We miss having you in the gym at T3 Performance. So I think this is the closest thing we can get to hanging out with you, picking your brain for an hour, man. I'm pumped.
Yeah, me too.
Bro, start by telling us something real quick. Besides like being probably top 3 best looking guests that we've had on the podcast, tell us something that James and I as hosts and that the listeners need to know about you that we can't find from just a quick like Instagram search.
That's a tough question.
We start with just the heat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you come in quick.
We'll just bring it.
No, I don't know. I guess my story is a little bit unique in terms of where I came from. So I guess without a quick Instagram search, you don't see, a lot of the stuff that you go through to get to where you want to get to. Just working tough jobs and trying to find some ways to get by to chase your dreams. So that stuff kind of goes unnoticed in an Instagram search or a Google search. So I guess just the grind of that is what I'm proud of, I guess. If that makes sense.
Heck yeah, man. We love to hear that. Go ahead and tell us a bit, man. Tell us a bit about the Jordan Kraus story. Tell us, growing up, what that looked like, your training through college, through pro ball, and then where you're at now.
Yeah. So growing up, I didn't do a ton of training. I wish I knew what I knew now, as many people say, but I guess I'll start with high school. I was a pretty average to above average baseball player, I guess. Kind of one of those kids that was just pretty good at everything, but nothing really stood out in terms of tools. So I wasn't getting like the big Division I looks or anything. I was like a borderline guy getting a little bit of looks there, but I ended up going to a smaller school, Wheeling Jesuit University, a Division II in West Virginia. I was able to go there and play right away as a two-way guy. So that was important to me. So ended up deciding on that. And, while I was there was no like strength and conditioning coach. We were kind of on our own, pretty limited resources. So that's kind of where my love for training and developing kind of started. I was just reading and getting my hands on everything I could and trying everything for myself just to see what I could do to throw harder. My freshman year, I ended up putting on like 25 pounds and had a little bit of velocity spike. So I just kind of fueled the fire in terms of training and, what I can continue to do to keep working and getting better. And then as college wrapped up, I had a pretty decent career, but the draft didn't happen for me. So I was looking to see what I could do to keep playing. I didn't get any affiliate opportunities, but I was able to catch on with an independent league team that first year after college. And I ended up getting cut that year. Learned a little bit about baseball and the business, and learning about some stuff that's outside of your control. But I was able to catch on with another team the following year and kind of get my start in pro ball there. And from there, I just started coaching in the off season. So that first year, I was able to catch on with a buddy of mine at Ashland University. I was an assistant pitching coach there. Got my first, taste of coaching. After I was a grad assistant at Wheeling, I should have clarified. I spent 2 years as a GA, but that was just, a little bit different than actually being a full-time coach. But after my little stint with Ashland, I was able to come over to where you guys are at T3 for a couple off seasons. And I just kind of spent every year playing and coaching in the off season and kind of developing myself and developing other guys. And, that's kind of where my passion for it started.
Yeah, and go in a little bit more detail because we've known you for a long time, and I've heard your stories about your experience at Ashland as a coach. And a lot of kids come out of maybe playing in college and they're like, I want to coach, but they aren't willing to do a lot of things that you went through and that you had to kind of figure out, because now you're coaching at Ashland and you're also still pursuing your career as a baseball player. So like, what kind of things did you need to do to survive as a human, like working, coaching, and training? Like, what were some of those stories, like, that I remember you talking about as what you had to do to get to the next level?
Yeah, those are long days. And that's kind of what I was hinting at in the beginning of like the stuff that you don't see, behind the scenes. But when I was coaching there, I obviously had to get another job while I was doing that. So my days pretty much were, I was up at 4:35. I was driving about 45 minutes to an hour to a truck stop. I was washing semi trucks with a buddy of mine. He hooked me up with a job there. So I would do that from like 5:30, 6 a.m. until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I would drive back to the university, and then we would be on field or inside, depending on the time of year, coaching from, 2 to 5, 6 range. And then, after that was my time to train. So I'll get in the gym and get my throwing in the evening around 6 or 7, and then get some food, go to sleep, and do it all over again. So just the sacrifices that you got to make to do that kind of stuff, people probably don't realize. But those are some long days, but it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I heard a quote, when things tend to get the worst and you struggle the most is when you make the most progress as a human, as an individual. And, if I remember our conversations, right, like this is the time where you started climbing in your velocity as a pitcher. So like when your life was the hardest in terms of your workload, like you were able to start progressing and throw harder continually, even with all these limitations surrounding you. What did your training look like? Because you're tired as hell. It's 6 o'clock. The last thing you want to do is work out. Like, what kind of energy outputs did you have, and what got you excited to go train?
And then how are you able to dose your caffeine at 6 p.m.?
I had to learn on that.
200 milligrams. It's geez.
I couldn't figure out why I wasn't sleeping good if I was taking pre-workout at 5 p.m., but that's a different story. No, like just the drive and the passion and knowing that I wanted to make it as a player, like that's what gave me the motivation after a long day. But my training was pretty consistent. It was just one of those things that wasn't an option. Like it had to get done. It was just part of the day that you had to get it done. And some days were obviously better than others. Some days you kind of just check the box and get it done. And some days you have that extra boost. But no, it was a lot of fun. It was long days, but we want me to go like into the actual training, or like how deep into that do you want to get into?
Yeah, man, just like highlight what, like on those days where you were excited and felt good, like what were some of those favorite lifts that you had? Like favorite exercises that did get you jacked up to go train?
Yeah. When I was playing, my favorite lifts were like deadlift was probably number 1. And I would say reverse lunge was probably number 2. Towards the end of my career, I got, into those as much as I could, just because they were fun for me and I could load them up and I felt good doing them. And we kind of tend to like the lifts that we're good at. So I kind of just flock to those. My favorite lifts are a lot different now that I'm not playing, but yeah, just those two were probably the ones that stand out. And, I still got after it, upper body stuff too. I feel like that's come a long way in the baseball industry, but some people are still a little hesitant about some of that kind of stuff. But I wasn't afraid to do that either.
Now, as you talk about like hesitation in baseball world and upper body, we've heard from numerous people like never take an overhead athlete overhead with anything, which makes me scratch my head a little bit. But for you as a coach, as a player, did you have any like moments that really shifted how you thought about coaching and training, that then from that moment you were able to kind of either translate into your own training, or now as a coach and you're responsible for athletes, that you've implemented with the athletes that you're in front of?
Like, I guess a shifting moment for me was just realizing that like every physical problem is just like a movement problem, right? So at the end of the day, if we're trying to make somebody move differently and like in a physical way, then we just have to change what their movement strategy is. So they're trying to complete their task at hand for whatever sport they're playing, and so they have a solution that they go to as like a default when they move. So if we can change that, like by dosing it in the weight room or dosing it on the skill side, eventually we can get somebody to move a little bit differently and perform a little bit better, which is the end goal. So just using the weight room and using different like things in the skill work to actually get somebody to shift their movement solution and actually kind of change the way that they want to move or desire to move. And that's where getting stronger in certain positions or opening up new ranges of motion to give somebody a different option, a different path in terms of movement. So when I kind of looked at it that way, it really simplified things for me, and I was able to be a lot more efficient with things and get guys, from point A to B a lot quicker.
I want to go back a second, Jordan, because I think a lot of people might connect to that point that you talked about earlier, right? Like getting up 5 o'clock, like you're going to do something you don't want to do, but you're doing it because it's paying the bills, right? You're washing semi trucks for hours, and then you're going to the place that you want to be to help continue to push your career forward. I think a problem is a lot of people think like, oh, I've got this, and this, right? I've got like this 9 to 5. I want to be, a freelance artist, but I need to work this 9 to 5, and then I don't have time for other things. Like if you felt like you were drawn to the sport, like you felt like this is what you needed to do, this is what you were going to do, this is what you were brought here for. So like, it didn't matter what that 24 hours looked like. You knew that you had to get that work done. And for you, it was, as you explained, right? For other people, it looks completely different. But I want people to understand that like when you're really drawn to something and you really want something, don't let things get in your way like that. Right. We had a guy on who and I joke about the caffeine because he had talked about he had to train at like 9 or 10 o'clock. Right. So he's taking pre-workout at 9 o'clock. Like you're doing it at 6, 7 o'clock. So just understand, people who are listening, that like, if you want something bad enough and you're drawn to something bad enough that you're going to do whatever it takes to be able to get to that point. And with that being said, Jordan, tell us a little bit about where you are now. Like we had a day in the life as you were like coming up and as you were grinding and you were trying to figure it out and you were trying to get your name on the map. Now, like you've done some pretty cool things and you're in a pretty cool place. Why don't you tell us about where you're at now and then what a day kind of looks for you now on days that you don't have the Cutoffs Coffee podcast with James and I.
I got you. Yeah, just to reiterate, the caffeine at 6 o'clock is not a good idea for people that think it is a good idea. So let's not do that. But yeah, so now I'm at Cressey Sports Performance. I'm the pitching coordinator here. Been here for like 2 years. I did an internship here 2 years ago in one of my off seasons. And I was fortunate enough to know with my timing that the pitching coach here at the time, as I was wrapping up my internship, he was taking a job with the Mets. So the role was open and I was able just to transition into it right away. So a typical day here is like for the work side, most of our pro pitchers come in around 11 or 12. So depending on the day, they'll have bullpens or just throwing, and I'll be with those guys for an hour or two. And then this time of year, like all of our college guys are kind of trickling back to school. So that kind of opened up the midday a little bit, but for a while in the afternoon, a lot of the college guys would be there and we would get bullpens in and throwing and training. And then from there, it's a good mix of, high school guys and guys that are training for the rest of the day from the afternoon. So I usually wrap up around 7 o'clock at night. So the work day is kind of like 10ish to 7, and then I still get my training in and my Con Ed stuff in the morning and kind of work on myself in that time. So that's kind of the typical day for me right now, and that changes based on the time of year. because all the guys will be going into season here pretty soon. So things will shift a little bit, but that's kind of the typical day for me.
So, with your position now and with your work, when you were with T3 Performance, you've had the opportunity to see, at T3, the youngest of the youngest pitchers, position players and athletes you work with. And, over the years, you've had more and more experience with higher and higher level guys. As you're seeing these guys develop and the trend in baseball has really gone from back when we were playing, and it sounds funny to say that, but 90 miles an hour was your ticket to a D1 scholarship, period, even if you didn't throw strikes. But all of a sudden it's nobody cares about 90, and 95 is the new 90, and there's every major league team has at least one guy that can throw over 100. What has changed in the baseball world to see this shift?
Yeah, I think it's like any other sport. Guys are getting bigger, faster, stronger. We're getting better at getting guys bigger, faster, and stronger quicker. And so that raises the ceiling in terms of potential outputs on the mound. And on the other side of it, we're getting better at coaching guys and learning and understanding what it takes to throw hard. 10, 15 years ago, people would tell you it's more genetic and you can't really teach it. But that paradigm has shifted a lot in terms of we can train velocity, and there's things we can do to help guys throw harder. We don't have it all figured out by any means, but there's definitely a lot of strong correlation and trends that we see with body weight and outputs and stuff like that. So we just gotten a lot better at training, and we've gotten a lot smarter, I think, and more efficient, and guys just continue to get bigger and faster and stronger. And that just kind of pushes the envelope in terms of what velocity can be, I think.
Cressey Sports and Performance comes with a lot of weight to it, right? That's something that it's on your resume, that you say it and people know it. People understand that, especially in the baseball and the performance world. What's some of the stuff you guys are doing over there that has really helped kind of push this sport along and push the pace along and get our athletes to be able to produce these bigger outputs? What are some of the stuff you're doing there that you think is really changing the game?
I don't know if we do anything that's crazy unique or crazy different. I think it's just a matter of being really good at the basics and getting guys to really understand that if you master these basic things, that you can move on to the more advanced things. So I think that's one thing that I think Cressey Sports Performance as a whole, and all the strength coaches here and all the guys that I'm around, they do a really good job of just making sure that guys are doing what they need to be doing, and they're in really good positions all the time, and there's just no wasted effort. And the other side of that thing, I think, is that we collaborate really well in terms of the communication between the strength coaches, me as the pitching coach, and then the physical therapist that we have on staff, and the manual therapist that we have on staff. So just the collaboration of all those things, and then just being really good at the simple things. Like I said, I don't think we're doing anything that's crazy in terms of secret and no one else knows about it. It's just being really good at the basic stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that I was hoping that was the answer, and that's why I figured. And so I kind of gave you the softball there, for lack of a better term. What does Pro Guy gets with you guys in the off season? We got we got the throwing program, we got the pitching program, we got the strength program. Kind of talk us through that for guys who want to be there, right? For guys who want that. We're doing some great things over at T3 Performance with James and his Velo group. Talk us through what it looks like for an athlete who comes in, has a couple months with you, goes through the protocol, works with you on a daily or on a weekly basis. Talk us through what some of that stuff looks like.
Yeah, so it starts with an evaluation, and that is on both the strength and conditioning side and the pitching side. And it also depends on the level of the athlete. We'll have a couple major league guys that'll come in, and we're not really, looking to overhaul a lot of stuff. We're looking just to, stay healthy and do some minor things. So I'll speak more on a younger athlete, like a college or a minor league guy. So the strength and conditioning evaluation, I'll sit in on those whenever I can with the strength coach, just to talk with them and kind of see things through their lens. And then we'll do a video breakdown in terms of their mechanics, and then we'll look at their TrackMan data or Hawkeye data, whatever they have, and just kind of get a very holistic view of everything that they can do from the movement side, from the strength and conditioning side, from the pitching side, and then we'll kind of fill in the gaps that we think we need to fill in. So obviously we'll talk with the athletes and kind of talk about their goals and what they think they need to accomplish and what they think they need to do to get to the next level or to produce better. But we'll kind of collaborate as coach and player as well, especially for the older guys, because it's their career. It's not, it's not mine. But we'll kind of collaborate and kind of come up with some goals, and then we'll kind of roadmap it out based on how much time we have, when their season's starting, and what kind of stuff we think we can do to take them in the right direction. And that's where the collaboration between me and the strength coach happens too, is to say we got a guy that needs to work on his lower half on the mound, then we're gonna talk about that in the weight room and kind of see what some stuff we can do to layer in some more movement and some more patterning and get stronger and better positions. So it's just a very holistic approach in terms of all assets of performance and trying to, work on all of those at the same time and get guys to where they want to go.
And if you're familiar with, Cressey Performance, I think they have one of the best individualized approaches to performance training, from the standpoint of understanding with that initial evaluation, every guy is going to be an individual athlete coming in, and their outputs are going to be different. Their communication with their pitching coach is going to be different from guy to guy. All over Instagram, as people are more and more on social media trying to find their answers to how they can throw gas, through their phone screen, you see a lot of coaches saying that like everybody is an individual with mechanics, but at the same time they go in and they say like this has to happen for everybody. What is your take on some of those foundational elements of being an elite level thrower that do translate? And then what are some examples of like two different pitchers that throw completely different but still have successful outcomes?
Yeah, so with the first part of the question, I think everyone's going to be an individual, like you said. There's different ways to throw hard. There's not a lot of ways to throw hard and stay healthy, but there's difference between like KPIs or like key performance indicators, wherever you want to call them. Everyone has like those things in mind. Those are kind of consistent over like what you see with high level guys. There's a lot of stylistic differences and different nuances in terms of how guys get to those positions. So a lot of people look at how you load the back hip, where you get to when you get at front foot strike, how you use the front leg to pull back and get over your front side. There's a lot of different things that we see, and there's a lot of similarities between the guys that throw hard and stay healthy. But there's different ways to move through those positions. Like, for example, you have some guys that have more retroverted versus antiverted hips, meaning some guys like external rotation more than I like internal rotation. So that's going to change the way they load and unload the back hip, and it's going to change the way they get through their front hip. So there's different nuances in terms of how guys will get through certain positions. But there are some pretty commonality, like similar positions that the high level healthy guys will work through. So it's just kind of understanding movement and kind of understanding which things of those are like stylistic things that we can kind of leave and leave you unique and kind of make you do what you do well. And then there's certain things that we kind of know that like, hey, this is kind of correlated with better outcomes in terms of performance. So we want to change that a little bit and see if we can, help you stay healthier a little bit longer, maybe throw a little bit harder, a little bit more consistent, whatever that missing piece is. So just balancing the stylistic uniqueness and also balancing the important positions and stuff that we know that correlates well with performance.
So if you're a young pitching coach listening to this and you're trying to take this information and be able to apply it to your lessons, Jordan, what are some of the mistakes that you made early on as a pitching coach? And then how did you kind of shift into get where you're at now with the high level guys, that you were like, oh shit, I wish I would have avoided this when I was a young pitching coach, trying to help this 15-year-old kid throw harder?
Yeah, I think the first two things that come to mind with that are, one, I focus too much on like actual positions instead of how guys move in and out of positions. So we talk about like slowing things down and looking at like a back hip load or looking at where they get to at front foot strike. And it's like, okay, that's information, but how do they get there and how can you change that position? You're not going to change that position by saying, get to a different position at front foot strike. Like it happens too fast. It's too dynamic of a movement. So looking at their movement strategy, like I said before, and how they get to that position and what their body likes to do in terms of like loading and unloading their hip. I think that changed things a lot for me, because I used to just focus on the positions way too much when I was younger. And I think that shifted things for me pretty well. And then the other thing that, like I mentioned before, is just understanding that just because it doesn't look like aesthetically pleasing or visually pleasing, that doesn't mean it's bad. Like a lot of times that's a stylistic thing that makes them unique and makes them different, and hitters don't like different. So if you can keep a guy unique, keep him funky, keep him weird, but also keep him performing and getting him, in good positions that correlate to health and performance and all that kind of stuff. Just knowing the balance between those. I think I've probably screwed some guys up when I was younger because it didn't look right, and I didn't really know what I was looking at, and I tried to change it. So just understanding the difference between those things, I think, can go a long way too, especially as you get more exposure to higher level pitchers. Because you look at guys in the big leagues, they do things a lot differently, and sometimes what they do that's different might not be the healthiest thing, but they make a lot of money doing it, and they perform well doing it. And so it's a balancing act of making sure that you keep them unique and keep them performing. So I think those two things are what stand out in my mind.
Jordan, what do you think the biggest difference is between the guys who get there, play a season or two, kind of fizzle out, and then the guys who really have like longevity and pitch for a long time? I guess to take kind of like rate of injury out. But as far as just like work capacity, intensity, consistency, what are some of the things that you see from the best guys that you think, some of the high school, some of the college pitchers can take from that to help, progress their careers?
I think like excluding the outliers that are like just the freaks of the freaks that are the best of the best. I think the difference between, like, say for example, a AAA guy and a big league guy, I don't think the talent gap is all that different. I think it comes down to the mentality and the mindset and the consistency and some of the mental stuff and some of the stuff that you have inside that, it's harder to teach. So there's certain guys that have that factor, that it factor, that you just know they're going to make it, and they have that mental toughness and that mental edge, for lack of a better way to say it. It's hard to quantify, but you kind of know which guys have it and which guys don't. And especially with baseball, it's a game of failure, and so it can really beat you up pretty bad if you don't know how to handle that. And I think that's a big separator, as well as just consistency. Like, those guys that do make it, they don't miss. They take their catch play seriously. They do all the things that you're supposed to do, but they actually do it. But I think the mental piece is a lot bigger than people give credit to, and I think that's maybe a little bit less of a factor in terms of like high school to college to pro. There's obviously a bigger talent gap, but the higher levels you go, I think the mental side of it and the internal stuff matters a lot more.
You said, the stuff you should do but don't always do. And I think, to me, like, one of those things a lot of times with baseball players, just training, period. And you do have outliers out there that can wake up, roll out of bed, and throw 98, no problem, never touch the weight room. But that's not most people. So in terms of training, like, what percentage does our outputs in the weight room actually affect our outputs on the field? And is that percentage like age related? As you see younger and younger kids starting to specialize in baseball only, we've seen that trend in soccer, and then there's been an increase in just injuries generally. And you're kind of seeing the same thing with baseball. So, like, what percentage of that work we do in training, we know we should do it, but what actually does that carry over onto the field?
Yeah, I don't know if I could actually put an actual percentage on it, but I will say it's probably definitely weighted higher at an earlier age. So like as a younger athlete, the more movements you can get exposed to in the weight room and the more foundational movements that you can build upon, I think makes a bigger difference. So as you get older, that percentage might decrease in terms of like how much you can actually affect your performance with training. So like a big leaguer, for example, is probably not going to change a ton in the weight room, but we can layer some good movement in terms of maybe something they struggle with in their delivery. We can give them more exposure to that movement. Or if there is something glaring that they're trying to work on, then that percentage would go up. So we can use the weight room to help them make that shift in their movement too. But I think as a younger athlete, there's no substitute for getting exposure to different movements, like learning to get coordinated, like coordination in different movements. Like even just playing other sports, I would consider training for younger guys. Like how many cuts you make in a soccer game or a basketball game versus how many cuts you make in a baseball game. Not even close, right? And there's no substitute for that. So just giving your body context for different movements, different patterns at a young age, I think goes a long way in terms of being able to control your body and know where to find those positions as you get older. So I think the percentage changes based on the situation, and it also depends on the age a little bit, but there's still a time and place, you know, for those older, more experienced guys to make some changes in the weight room. But it might be a little bit more about health for them as they get older, right? Using the weight room as a tool to stay healthy, stay on the field, keep their body in the positions that they know they need to perform, because they're already doing it if they're at that high level. So we can use that as a tool to keep them in that performance, or keep them performing the way that they should. Then I think that's a good tool for them as well.
And is that super specific? The weight room stuff, do you think there's some big principles and some big blocks that we can take to pretty much give to high level baseball players and pitchers that are definitely going to keep them healthy and keep getting them stronger?
I think it gets more specific when you have more specific adaptations you need to perform. So as a younger athlete, it's probably more general. There's more general movement qualities. You're still trying to attack. You're trying to get generally stronger, generally more powerful. So like take the big leaguer, for example, once you get to that level, like you're probably producing at a high enough level to be on the field. And so at that point, you're probably only layering specific things if there's something specific that you want to work on in terms of your delivery. So at the end of the day, the weight room's a tool to get you on the field to perform better and stay healthy and stay on the field. So you have to keep that in mind. With training, you don't want to just to train if you're a professional athlete, right? You want to use that as a tool to continue to improve or continue to perform at the level that you perform at. So that piece really is probably more generic in terms of keeping you healthy and keeping you exposed to different movements and keeping you strong in different positions. And then it can be more specific if there is something that you want to work on specifically in your delivery as a pitcher. And obviously that applies to other sports as well. But at the end of the day, the transfer to the sport is what matters if we're training athletes, right?
Catching cleans. Sorry, James.
No, go ahead.
Catching cleans. And then we'll get back to that right after this. You know, going overhead, like James talked about, bench pressing, right? These are things that I see all the time, like thrown back and forth between the coaches about what we should do and what we shouldn't do with baseball players and pitchers and quarterbacks, you know, just like overhead athletes. I'm very open about the fact that I've never thrown 100 baseballs in a day or 1,000 baseballs in a day. So I don't understand what that adaptation process feels like. Talk us through kind of some things that you agree with and disagree with in the weight room and on the strength side when it comes to training baseball players and overhead athletes. Again, some of the things you agree with and disagree with, and then just some of those conversations that we have that you know that we've had kind of on the training floor at T3 Performance.
Yeah, so I'll use like the catching and clean example that you just referenced to. Like, can that make your can learning to do a proper clean, you know, train power, triple extension, all that kind of stuff? Sure, but at the end of the day, like the risk reward might not be there for a pitcher who relies on their wrists or elbows, and they need to feel good in those areas on a day-to-day basis. So in that situation, you might be better off training those qualities in a different way, jumping, med balls. There's other ways to train power that maybe have different yields in terms of like performance, but there's less risks involved. So that's just kind of one example. But like with overhead training, like if you're going to throw overhead, you probably need to be able to get overhead and be strong, but there's different ways to get there. So I think there's a time and place for bench press for pitchers, but there's a diminishing return on it, right? So once you have adequate pressing strength, like how strong do you really need to be to throw a baseball and compete at a high level? So I think that number is probably lower than people think it is. So we definitely bench press some of our guys, and there's a time and place for it, but there's also like a diminishing return. Like I said, like usually things kind of fall in the middle, and I think some people get too carried away, taking it to extreme, maybe trying to be different, trying to come up with something different. But I think the middle ground is usually where the sweet spot is in terms of not getting too crazy or outlandish with your training modalities, and kind of, like I said in the beginning, being really good at the basic stuff. I'm not sure if that answered your question. If there's anything more specific in terms of the training stuff that you wanted to get into with like the agreements and disagreements, we definitely can.
Yeah, man, I think that's great. I just have the conversations with two pitchers, let's say on the same team. One of them wants to just stick to high pulls and then like light carries. And then another guy wants to try to deadlift 500 pounds, bench 315, right? So it's just like you get two completely different athletes. And I'm trying to figure out the conversation that I need to be having with them to be able to give both of the athletes the best opportunity to get better. And I think if you've got an athlete who loves the weight room and that's like a part of his identity and that's a part of what he does, I think it's fine to be able to let him kind of explore that a little bit and push some weight when he wants to and do different variations of exercises that he wants to. And then if there's the guy who's allergic to it, like you mentioned, I think there's some adaptation there that he needs to be able to do and not be scared to be able to do, but also understand that you don't have to go try to set any world records at certain exercises.
Yeah. And I think like you kind of mentioned it without actually like focusing on it, but there's two different kind of athletes that you kind of deal with. There's the guys that want to do everything and do the most and do too much, maybe in some cases. And there's guys that you kind of got to push a little bit and then actually like bring them along because they don't really understand what hard work is. And there's some guys in the middle too, but I think that's where it's our job as a coach to understand what side of the spectrum that athlete's on and kind of understand the balance and know where to take them. And some of those things, like if they said like they like to train, give them a little bit of that. Like that's a big piece too. Like getting people excited about training and getting them in the weight room doing things they like is an important piece. Because if you don't like it, it's going to be a lot more monotonous and more of a grind. But if you like doing certain things, you got to dose that appropriately to keep them happy, keep them excited about training, keeping them doing things that they like to do. I think it's important too on the mental side of like training and doing all that stuff too.
I think that leads into what I was going to say, because I was talking about like what is strong enough and like, and how, hard you throw is like how fast is fast enough as a pitcher. And, again, with everything so available to us, we see on social media, all these guys throwing these velo pens year round. They're throwing as hard as they can and they're hitting crazy numbers. They're throwing 95, but at the end of the day, it's like, oh, this is an unsigned free agent. And you see his bullpen, he's throwing like 95, but not a single strike. Where did they go wrong from a standpoint of you have this dude who throws 95, but he's not on a roster anywhere? Is that dude spending way too much time on just trying to hit a better number, thinking that, well, if I throw 95, I'm not signed, but if I could throw 96, I'll get signed? Are we forgetting that we actually play games?
I think a lot of people probably do. Like we said before, like guys are getting bigger, faster, stronger. Like the floor for velocity is going up in terms of like how you get into a team, right? Like we said 95 is kind of the new 90, and that there's some truth to that. So if everyone's throwing harder, like how do you separate yourself? It's not as much with velocity anymore. It's learning how to pitch, it's learning how to compete, it's proving you can get outs at a certain level. And I think that gets unnoticed. So unless you're throwing, high upper nines, 100 around there, like it's not really outlier velocity anymore. So how are you going to separate yourself? And that's when it comes down to actually knowing how to pitch, knowing how to execute, doing all the things that you have to do to be a good pitcher, and not just selling out for some cool numbers and posting it on social media. So there's definitely a gap in terms of the pitching side, but at the same time, if you are throwing 100, you probably don't have to be as fine with your command, right? So there's a give and take, and there's a certain level that you have to get to in terms of like velocity and performance to be able to say that you're one of those guys on that end of the spectrum versus somebody on the other end that has to be a little bit better at pitching and the skill of pitching.
So with your background, to me, you're that guy that knows right away after maybe just watching a bullpen and seeing a guy train if the guy's strong enough or if he needs to focus more on like being a pitcher. Could you walk us through what it looks like to have one of your pro guys go through a bullpen with you, and like what are some of the conversations you have? What are some of the intentions that you set up going into that bullpen?
Well, I think you just hit it right there with the intention piece. Like somebody at that level, like there's got to be a goal or an end outcome for the bullpen, right? Whether it's working on a mechanical piece, whether it's working on a certain pitch, whether it's working on execution, there's different layers to what you have to do to compete as a pitcher. And especially at that level, like there's different things that certain guys will struggle with. Like we have a pitcher that has big league stuff. He has everything off the charts, struggles to execute. Like, so we put him in more game-like situations every bullpen. After 10 pitches, boom, we go right to hitters. Like, and then as soon as we get some live at bats going, he's going to throw live at bats as much as he possibly can. Because for him, it's not about working on a pitch metric. It's not about working on output. He throws hard enough. He has good enough stuff to compete at the big league level, but he doesn't execute well enough. So it's just manipulating the environment in terms of what this athlete needs to work on to get to whatever they want to get to. And for him, it's the big league. So we got to work on his execution. And then there's obviously another athlete on the other end of the spectrum that not throwing hard enough. So is it a mechanical thing or is it like an intent thing? Some people just don't know how to throw hard, and you got to teach them how to like get after it a little bit. Some people are just a long way away in terms of their movement quality and movement efficiency. So every day we're doing more constraint drills with med balls, water balls, plyo balls, getting them to move better so that they can throw harder, right? So there's just different layers to it, and it all depends on the goal of the athlete and where they're at in their development process. But I think setting up an intention for every bullpen and having a goal and an outcome for every bullpen, because if you just get up there and throw, you don't know if you accomplished anything that day. But hey, if I'm working on, you know, my back hip load, you can look at that and say, hey, I got a little bit better at that today. Or if I say, hey, I'm working on the spin on my fastball or whatever it is, that you can quantify that. So just knowing that you have an intention for each training session, you can actually, you know, see if you got better that day, if you actually have a goal or intention behind it.
And you know, and to follow that up, because like we'll also see a lot of like kids playing catch and videotaping every rep, and then like watching that video before they throw another ball. At your high level college, you know, pro guys, like how much video time do you spend during the session, or is that something that you do after the session? Like, how do you integrate like the best tool and the worst tool we have? Because we could use it in an awesome way, but also I see it like misused more often than not.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. And I think it comes down to understanding the personality of the athlete. Like there's certain guys that are a little bit neurotic and they can't handle a little bit of extra video mid bullpen because they're going to obsess over it, and it takes away from what we're trying to do. And there are certain guys that are a little bit, you know, maybe more advanced or level-headed or mentally strong that can handle a little bit of that in the middle of a bullpen or after. I would say more times than not, we talk about things before or after, and then kind of in the bullpen, let them execute and let them kind of figure it out and kind of, you know, do things on their own. Obviously there to help them a little bit and give them some cues here and there. But I try to get all that kind of stuff set in their mind in their pre-work with plyos. Like we'll do mountain plyos and stuff, but before they get on the mound, just to work on patterning stuff. That's what we're working on. But I think there's a time and place for that stuff, but it's also knowing the athlete and knowing, you know, how to dose that appropriately, because there's some guys that take it way too far and they're videotaping every throw, like you said, and they're going backwards because they're obsessing over things that they're not going to change in a day. It's going to take months to change this, and if you look at it every day, it's just going to knock you down and send you in the wrong direction.
On the topic of dosing, how can we properly dose foam rolling and plyo balls? I've seen guys spend 3, 4, 5 hours on that, and then spend no time in the bullpen, and then spend no time in the weight room. What's the proper balance of that? When as a coach can I say, all right, man, time to move on? Like, what does that look like working with those implements?
So it's the foam rolling piece is a pretty small piece, right? That's just like a little bit of a movement prep thing. So just knowing that, like, if you have a big bucket full of training economy, if you're spending a lot of it on that, you're not pushing yourself in the right direction. And then same thing with the plyo stuff. Like I just see that get taken a little bit too far, because at the end of the day, you got to throw a leather baseball with seams. So I think it's important to use that stuff for patterning, use it to make changes, but understand that if you want to get better at your sport, you're going to have to do things that are more closely related to the sport, and then understanding where those other tools and other things come into play. And I think that maybe that falls on us as coaches to understand that we have to explain that to athletes a little bit better, maybe, and understand that, like, hey, you laying on the foam roller for the next 30 minutes isn't going to help you that much. Like, if you want to recover or you want to feel better, there's other stuff we can do. Let's talk about your sleep. Let's talk about your nutrition. Let's talk about why you're not recovering, instead of just using that as a Band-Aid. So That probably falls on us, maybe as coaches, to maybe explain that a little bit better to the guys that we actually have in front of us. But there's definitely a proper amount of that, and it's subjective, and there's more nuances to it to understand. Some guys need a little bit more, some guys need a little bit less, but I think as a whole, there's probably better ways to spend that training economy than all on plyo balls or all on foam rollers.
Yeah, and I think we all agree that there is a great place for foam rollers and recovery. I just don't think it's 30 minutes, the first 30 minutes you're at the gym when you were supposed to start training 28 minutes ago, right? Like I think if you spend the first half hour in the gym when you're supposed to be warming up and supposed to be moving, just sitting on a foam roller on Instagram, I think that's the problem. Talk to us while we're on, speaking recovery, about some of the things you've been able to do with your athletes to help the recovery process, understanding that we're throwing and we're training hard and we're doing all that kind of stuff. Let's talk specifically after maybe a bullpen first, like what we can do to start the recovery process. And then let's transition to talk a little bit about weight room. Once you're in there and you're getting after it and you're hitting heavy front squat grip, reverse lunges and deadlifts, what are some things that we can do to start that recovery process for the athletes?
Yeah, so I'm pretty fortunate in terms of like where I work, that the training stuff's pretty dialed in, and I don't have to spend a ton of time on that. But I think the first piece of that is understanding how to like consolidate stressors. So knowing when your bullpen day is, when your high intent throwing day is, and when your high intent lifting days are, like knowing how to blend those and consolidate those so that you have days to recover. So if you went heavy lift Monday, heavy throw Tuesday, heavy lift Wednesday, heavy throw Thursday, like your central nervous system, your body's never recovering, right? So just understanding how to dose high and low days throughout the week in terms of training and throwing, I think is the first step in recovering properly. And then on the second piece is just knowing how to lock in your nutrition and sleep. I think it's pretty simple in terms of getting those things right. You're going to recover and feel better. There's other tools and modalities out there that can maybe take care of the last 5-10%, like the Mark Pros and all that kind of stuff. But I think if you get the sleep and nutrition piece right, and you get your body weight in a good place, and you take care of that stuff, and you know what you're supposed to do with those, I think that takes care of the big majority of those things. And then on top of that, like I said, just knowing how to dose those recovery days and those low intent days and making sure that you're getting that balance, I think that takes care of 90 to 95% of the recovery piece.
As a part of the recovery piece, we see pitchers doing, the banded external rotations, the little like trampoline throws and all this fancy stuff. It's hard to tell like what's trash arm care and what's cash arm care. So like, what are your, go-to arm care techniques that you implement with your guys? And is that, more of an individual basis, or are there just general things that you could give some of our listeners who, a lot of them are going to be baseball players tuning into this, that they can start implementing for their arm care and know that it's actually taking them a step forward, as opposed to, wasting another 15 minutes of their training time?
Yeah, I think it's definitely individualized in terms of like what exercises and what positions that you maybe need to do. But I think a lot of people would benefit from just the idea of it. What matters more, I think, is the week or the month. It doesn't matter, hey, as soon as I'm done throwing, I have to go hit a set of banded external rotations. Like, I don't think that matters that much. I think it matters more that you're getting all that stuff in dose throughout the week, getting all the exercises that you have to do in some capacity, and that could be on the training floor as well, right? So just making sure that you check those boxes and making sure that you're getting your arm care in, I think is much more important than just getting it done. As soon as I throw my last pitch, I got to do my waiters walks and rebounders and external rotations. I don't think that matters as much as just knowing that you have to get these things in and dose them throughout your week and throughout your month and throughout your training. I think that matters a lot more. But on the individual piece, like the example that comes to mind is some guys that are more hypermobile might need to spend more time, in end range external rotation with some of that banded stuff, just getting closer to their end range. Obviously, you want to get there with everybody, but some guys that are super loose, super hypermobile might need to spend a little bit more time owning those positions from a proprioceptive standpoint and just owning that end range control because they have more range of motion. So I don't think there's a right or wrong in terms of arm care. I think it's important to hit your pieces that you should hit. And I think people take it too far in terms of pre-throwing. So rather than just getting yourself activated, getting some blood flow to those areas and getting warmed up. People like hit 10 sets of 10 of different like band exercises, and they're fatiguing the muscles that they need before they need to throw. So there's just different layers and different ways to balance that. But I think the overarching thing is that you just have to make sure that you get those things done throughout your week and throughout your month and know when to do them. And it's less important to just, hey, I got to get it done as soon as I get done throwing. There's more to it than that, I think.
I think that pre-throwing routine is something that is like, it always grinds my gears. So like, for example, let's say you're a guy that comes out of the pen, but all off season, your pre-throwing routine takes you about 2 hours to get ready to throw your pen. But then as soon as you go with your team and you're in season, right, you're going to get the call from the bullpen. Hey man, we need the righty. You're going up in 10 pitches, which is two completely different environments. So like, you know, what are some things that we need to do before we start throwing a baseball to make sure we're hot and ready to go?
Yeah, it might be like an unpopular opinion, but I think warm-ups are a little overrated in terms of like, I have to do this exercise or that exercise. It's like, there's some overarching things that you need to do. Like you got to get your tissue temperature up, you got to get your central nervous system going, and you got to like prime some movements that you're going to do for that day. But other than that, there's plenty of ways to do it, right? So I think it's more of a mental thing for guys that think, I have to hit this exercise and I have to do this and I have to do this and I have to do this. And before you know it, you're doing 25 different things before you got to throw a ball. And that's just taking away from what you're going to do with the ball in your hand. So if you get your body going the right way, there's only few things that you need to do. Obviously, it's important to warm up. When I say it's overrated, I'm talking about like I have to do this exercise every single time, or I have to do all these different things. It's just like, no, you can get your body going in different ways. But I think there's a time and place for certain exercises for guys that maybe need to work on certain patterns. But as an overarching thing, if you get those first few things right in terms of warm up, I think it's pretty simple. I think it's often overcomplicated.
Dude, I love that answer. I had this question for later, but I think now's a perfect time to ask. Have you seen, speaking of routines, like some quirky like pregame routines, throwing routines, batting routines? What have you seen with some of the guys that you've worked with, and even back to your playing days? I'm always interested to see like how baseball players get ready for games or for pitching or for hitting. Any good stories about that?
You know, there's definitely been some weird guys that I've come across throughout my playing career, and guys that do some unique or different things. It's just a matter of like figuring out what works for you, I guess. There's nothing like super specific that comes to mind that's like outlandish or crazy, but there's definitely some stuff that I've seen over the years that you kind of give like a side look, like what's that guy doing? But part of that's mental, and part of that's like I said before, what makes them feel like they have to do to prepare. But I think baseball players are a little bit unique and a little bit weird in that sense, that they end up doing some different stuff. But unfortunately, nothing crazy comes to mind off the top of my head. I'll probably think of something later. But
yeah, I was going to say, if you come up with it, stop us, let us know. Then you speak the mental side too, right? Like, and that I wanted to transition that way. Like, okay, I do this weird thing because it gets me in the right mental state to be able to compete, right? To be able to perform. What kind of weight do you guys put on the mental side over there at Cressy? And then like in your sessions, like, are they daily conversations about, you know, how to work through those 6 inches between the ears, or is it monthly? Do you have people who come in? Cause it's just so interesting with a sport like baseball, how tough it is. And like you mentioned, how often you fail. We've got to be so strong mentally and between the ears. What are some of the things that you guys have added to be able to benefit your athletes on the mental side?
So I think, like you said, it's really important, but I think one of the biggest things that I talk about with guys is having like a pre-pitch and a pre-game routine in terms of how you get to your mental space. And I think that it's different for everybody. Like there's certain guys that are super outgoing and loud and extroverted, and they want to talk to everybody and just have fun. And that's how they get into a good mental space before a game. And then there's certain guys that put the headphones in and kind of sit in the corner with their hood up and try to lock in. So I think it's understanding your own personality and understanding what works for you. And, you know, on the other side of it, like having a plan and a pre-pitch routine, I think goes a long way. And just knowing how to control your breath, knowing how to control your mental thoughts, and having a routine to get those thoughts in the right direction and kind of get you to that flow state. So there's just different styles and different strategies. And me as a coach, I'm trying to have, different tools in my toolbox to help guys understand their own mental side and help them mentally get to a good place to perform, on a day-to-day basis.
Does some of that failure in the sport, the consistent failure, and then training through different modalities, does that help make baseball players some of the best athletes on the planet?
Oh, definitely.
Or do you, where do you stand on that? On that question about, because James and I've gone back and forth on it a couple times. Like, a baseball player who can smash a ball out of the park, throw 95 miles an hour, sprint around bases, like do a lot of things that are pretty athletic. Does that carry over to other sports, or do you think there are other sports that could be able to step on a baseball diamond and have some success?
So I think it, like, we joke that, like, pitchers and baseball players maybe aren't as athletic, but I think that what we see is that they're maybe not as physically impressive as some of the other sports. Like, guys in basketball are jumping out of the gym, football players strong. But in terms of like a skill set, I think baseball is one of the most skill intensive sports. Like, most of those guys that are in the big leagues were 3-sport athletes. They were the best basketball player and the best football player on their team. If they wanted to continue with those sports and compete at a high level, they would probably have to have some more physical improvements, adaptations. They'd have to get bigger, stronger to compete, at the college level or professional level in football and football and basketball. Like, some of those sports, I think, is more of a physical nature. But on the skill side, like the baseball piece, I think is, those are some of the best athletes in the world because of how much skill and how much goes into throwing a ball and hitting a ball far. I think there's, you can't overstate how much goes into that.
Yeah. And I would not stand a chance on a baseball diamond, but I know I could have success on a football field, on a basketball court, on a volleyball court. And that's what I think is so interesting about that. Like, you could take a pitcher who's a good athlete and put him out at, I don't know, running back, wide receiver. Maybe he has some success, put him on a basketball court. I know a lot of pitchers who could shoot the ball really well on the basketball court, right? But like, how would the other athletes transition onto the baseball diamond? Jordy, I got a couple questions. Go ahead.
I think a piece that gets overlooked on that side too is that if you don't play a rotational sport or a throwing sport at a younger age, like, you lose out on a lot of adaptations that are much, much harder to develop at an older age. So, like, throwing, for example, like, your shoulder literally changes its shape. Like, it gets more retroverted as you throw at a young age. So if you didn't throw at a young age and you try to pick up a ball at a later age, your shoulder doesn't have the adaptation to get into a lot of layback and external rotation. And that's something that if you don't do when you're younger, it's might be something that's very, very hard to change, or maybe even impossible. I don't know the answer to that question, but those adaptations that you make at a young age for certain, like, rotational capacities and like the shoulder retroversion, for example, I think are pieces that get overlooked and that are really important for that sport.
Yeah, you make a great point with that. Because I look at all my football guys, and we all throw baseballs like footballs, so we can produce about zero force when that baseball comes out of our hand. I have some questions, Jordan, that I want to kind of bounce around. Don't really have a ton of continuity, but like, you can relax a little bit. You know what I mean? Don't have to like answer these too seriously. Probably a little easier questions than the ones that we've been talking about earlier, but all ones that I think need valid responses. So the first one, like you had mentioned, and I didn't even think about it like this until you said this, but could myself stepping up on a in a bullpen, let's say, and I'm going to throw to some live hitters, the best guys in the world, I am probably throwing 60, 70 miles an hour. I probably don't have very good technique. James and I are going to start working on it here pretty soon, but would I stand a chance of striking somebody out because they're used to a pitch and a throw looking a certain way and coming at a certain speed, but then now it's coming from somebody who doesn't develop that skill set? Would I have any success against the batter, or would I just get like taken 500 feet to left field?
probably not a ton of success. I think there is a time and place to like be different. You know what I mean? Like I said earlier, like being an outlier and being unique, there's definitely something to that. But yeah, I don't know if 70 mile an hour is going to get it done at that level.
And we're assuming that we're assuming that he can throw 70.
Right.
End, yeah.
And that I can get it to the plate. I'm not totally even sure about that. And I ask because I think about my sport and playing in the Arena Football League is we would see people who would play like they played indoor. And once you got good at indoor, you played it a different way. So I was thinking it's interesting, like how that rolls over to other sports. And we would have players who would have some success for a day, and then you'd figure them out and think like, okay, this is how they're doing it. And I imagine that's maybe one pitch for me. I get it there. The guy swings way ahead of it and is like, oh, okay, let me sit back on this 55 mile an hour fastball. Okay. Best, in your opinion, what's the best baseball movie ever made?
Best baseball movie. That's tough.
I was going to say, maybe these are even actually harder questions now that I'm thinking about it.
That's actually probably harder. Yeah. I really like Bull Durham, and I really like For the Love of the Game. Those are the first two that popped in my head. There's tons of good baseball movies, but those two are probably my first two favorite.
Any love for the series with the Indians?
Oh yeah, yeah. Major League, yeah.
Major League, yeah. Oh, yeah. Those were great films. What was as a coach and as an athlete? This is tough, James. This is a new one too. What was the last skill that you learned?
As a player or as a coach?
I mean, like in your life, and it can be anything. It doesn't even have to be baseball related.
Oh,
like the last skill that you decided to sit down and take some time and work on.
I've actually been investing a lot into my golf game recently, so I'm really trying to make that my way to compete after, I'm not playing anymore. So golf's my new avenue. So I'm actually spending a lot of time like trying to reshape the swing and not just go out there and just rip as hard as you can for some fun on the range. So actually working on that, I enjoy it.
Yeah, I just think it's so interesting with coaches because we're always trying to help athletes acquire skills. So I'm thinking, I'm reflecting, I'm thinking, what have I done recently that has been hard, that has challenged me to try to learn a new skill? How is that going? How is the golf game?
It's average. I mean, I said I'm probably above average to like you're not typical golfer, but like to good golfers, I'm pretty average. So I'm like a 10 handicap right now. So I'm hoping to get that down into single digits this year. But it's hard this time of year with the snow and everything to get out there into the range and get some more reps in. So it's just a little passion project for me in the spring. Yeah,
dude, 10 handicap. That's pretty good. I think that's better than average.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's better than average.
Well, it depends on who you play with. I'm still out there losing money to these guys that are single digit handicaps. So,
well, I guess if that's who you're comparing yourself, then yeah, you better tighten it up. What is next for Jordan Kraus?
It's a good question. I think at some point for me as a coach, I want to get back into a team setting as opposed to the private setting forever. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if I want to pursue a college job or a pro job. I'm not entirely sure, but I do miss being on the field, and I do miss that competitive aspect. As in the private sector, you spend all the time training and getting guys ready, and then you kind of miss out on the reward piece of going out there and getting to see them compete and win and have fun. So I definitely think I want to get to a team setting at some point.
And then I also want to ask about something that you've maybe, and we talked about it a little bit in the podcast, but maybe something that you've shifted your thought process on within the last year. And again, this doesn't even have to be coaching or baseball. Just something about you that maybe you were set on for a long time, and then you came across something and realized, okay, maybe I haven't been doing this the right way. Is there something you can think of specifically that you've changed your mindset on within the last year?
No, I think just like we kind of mentioned before, just avoiding like the extremes in terms of like usually the sweet spot's usually in the middle for a lot of things. So I think with social media, like people kind of post like things to be different and things that are more on the extreme side. But I think if you really look at it and evaluate like what usually works for anything, whether it's skill development or just like anything in your life. Things typically are kind of somewhere in the middle ground. And I think that's been a focus of mine lately, is trying to be really good at the basics, be really good at the stuff that we know works, and trying to dose the other stuff appropriately, but kind of staying locked into that middle ground.
And then one of the last questions kind of in this series. And I'm looking at the pro team. I'm looking at the college team. I'm looking at the high school team. Where does conditioning work fit into a good baseball program? And tell me if you need me to kind of expand on that question.
Well, I'll give you my answer, and you tell me if I was taking it the direction you wanted to. I think it's skill dependent and sport dependent. So obviously in baseball, how often are you running more than 60 feet, 90 feet, 120 feet, home to first is 90 feet, right? So how often do you have to run a triple, a double, a home run? So knowing that you have to have a certain baseline of conditioning as a hitter or a pitcher is important. And I think there's an important recovery piece into like the heart rate variability stuff. You can get into that, but like there's always a baseline that you need, but then not overdoing it and not spending too much training economy on something that's going to make little impact for your performance. So you can be elite at conditioning, but that's probably not going to make you an elite baseball player. So understanding that there's a certain baseline you need, and then there's a certain amount that's just probably too much, and taking away from other adaptations that you could be chasing, whether it's strength, power, or skill work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. We always wrap up with this, Jordy, because we want something that we can take away as coaches and from athletes from the conversation. And this can be an exercise. This can be a mindset. This can be a sleep routine. But what do you think we're missing between, if you had the opportunity to stand up in front of 1,000 baseball players and 1,000 strength and conditioning coaches? What do you think we're missing in the world of strength and conditioning as far as like the pitching and the throwing side goes?
I think it's the collaboration between the two departments. So obviously my job as a pitching and skill coach is to get guys better at pitching. But sometimes that means I got to set my ego aside and say, hey, you got to go get really strong, and you got to go get in the weight room and spend most of your training economy over there for the next year or two. And then obviously we'll still work on skill stuff, but like, I'm not going to be able to make a big impact on you until you can do this, like X, Y, Z. And you're not going to be able to do that until you get in the weight room. And I think that goes on the flip side for strength and conditioning coaches too. It's like, you got to sometimes set your ego aside as a strength and conditioning coach and say, hey, like the end goal for this athlete is to be better at their sport. It doesn't matter if I get this athlete to deadlift 600 pounds. That's not going to help them, in their sport. So just understanding that the collaboration between the two is the most important piece. I think that's when you get guys to maximize their potential, is giving them what they need and not giving them what you want. If that makes sense.
Dude, that's a great point. Where can people find you if they want to hear more about Jordan Kraus?
I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm not like super active. I've done a couple other podcasts. If you search that, you can probably hear some more. But those are probably the best places to reach me. Feel free to send me any message, DM, whatever. I'll be happy to answer and get back to anybody on those.
Dude, awesome. Is there anything you feel like we really that we missed that you really wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. It's just good to see you guys. I haven't seen you guys in a bit. Good to talk to you and good to catch up.
Yeah, man, I think the biggest.
If we learn one thing, when he comes back and we play a round of golf, don't bet against a guy who's honest about a 10 handicap, because he probably shoots a little better than that.
No, that's it. That's my handicap. I've been tracking.
For real. I'm not even good enough to start looking at what my handicap would be.
I don't even know how to calculate that.
Yeah. I don't even know how to do that. Jordan, send us the app that you use to figure out your handicap. Hey, man, really loved having you on. We were disappointed that we didn't get to see the arms. He's in the hoodie. Must be a cold day out there where he's at. But thank you all for listening. Episode 30 with Jordan Kraus, man. This has been awesome. Great talking to you again, Jordan. Great seeing you, bro. Beard looks great. Again, listeners, we ask y'all every time, continue, please practice gratitude. Tell the people that you love them, and remember to live your life stimulated. Thanks for listening. We'll see y'all on the next one.